pleasure to welcome you all to the Self-Leadership, an Essential Skill in Challenging Times. Today we're going to share some content I shared a couple of weeks ago with the British Swiss Chamber of Commerce, and there was such an interest in the topics. I thought, I'd love to do this again. And as I said, my name is Roberto for those of you, but I think pretty much everyone knows me and has seen me speak, so no need to introduce myself. Your microphones are on mute, but that doesn't mean we don't want to hear you, because in just a moment, we're going to go ahead and actually do a couple of polls. But before we get to the polls, I just wanted to say, I was doing this talk with the British Swiss Chamber of Commerce, and I was humbled because, when you speak to people over the last couple of months with, people are struggling. So I just really wanted to share some ideas, and not just because it's new or it's cool or it's fun or it's interesting information. I really hope that, hopefully we can make this as relevant as possible for you to what is happening right now. And I know we're all at different stages of coming out of lockdown. South Africa more in lockdown. Switzerland, it's almost like nothing's ever happened. So everyone's in different positions. So hopefully it'll be relevant. And I'd like to share and teach you some of the skills that I hope that we can use not only during these challenging and changing times, but also something that we can, let's rather use these challenging times to learn, practice these new skills so that we're better off in the future together. And, and I really want to start off with a poll. Alessandro, will you go ahead and share the poll for us? It's the poll number 1. And I'd really like to know, what is your biggest personal concern right now? And there are 9 options. Ali, if you can just go ahead and, perfect. Thank you so much. There are 9 options. You might need to scroll down to see all 9 of those. And you can either answer that from your own personal perspective or from your team's perspective. I mean, what is your top personal concern right now? Is it health and wellness? Is it the kids and the family at home, trying to manage life and work, or is it even some of the financial aspects, of the situation? People have lost their jobs. I know of lots of people working reduced hours. Some people have taken pay cuts. Is it the disruptive routines? I know when lockdown happened here and now getting back out of it, disruptive routines is a big one. It can also be the distractions of having everyone work at home, everyone work in different places. Maybe it's, the resources, the tools, maybe it's the unemployment rates and the bad news, maybe it's just, in terms of you working longer hours, the fear and anxiety of what's going on. There's so many things. So if we can go ahead and do that, if you can select as many as you want on this one. So you're welcome to select more than one if you have, and, just go ahead and hit submit. And Alessandro, if you want to just, you can end that poll, and I'd love to see what the results are of that one. If we were doing this in a different time, it would be interesting because we might actually get some very different results, but it'll be interesting to see what comes up with this one. And this is interesting. I mean, so we've got, I realize it's a small group, and that's maybe why we've got so many different answers, from health and wellness, finances, disruptive routines, distractions, time management. I think we're covering all of those. And what I find interesting during challenging and changing times is, probably what is most evident is the biggest concern that people have is generally personal concerns. People look at it and go, how is this going to affect me? Me personally, what does it mean for me? So, let's keep all of these personal concerns in mind as we talk about what is really happening in respects to self-leadership. So if you can stop sharing that one, and we can move to the next slide. Thank you. So as we move on, and we're going to take another poll in just a couple of minutes, but what I'd like to know in the next poll is, there are 3 research findings, and I'd like to know which one you think is the most important. And this time, you can only select one when we hit the poll, but it's, what are you experiencing, in terms of relevant right now? Because over the last 5, 7, or 10 years, there's really been an explosion in research, and especially in self-research versus leadership in general in the past and not so much self-leadership. But there are three main findings, and the first one is that the proactive participation of self-leaders is the essential ingredient of successful execution in any organizational initiative or change effort. So what does that really mean? It means that, you can put grand plans into place, spend huge amounts of money, putting change into effect, but the single and number one ingredient of any success, whether it's going to be successful, is yourself, are your self leaders, your people being proactive, because that's what's really necessary to make change a success. So, if this is really critical, it can be, and in self-leadership, it's much more important that, we give credit to the research, because, in the past, it's been about leadership in general and not self-leadership in an organization. In self-leadership now, with so many of us working more autonomously, remotely from home, it's probably more true now than ever before. The second thing that research shows is that there are key proactive self-leadership behaviors that we know that make a difference. When we talk about self-leadership, we can actually identify the types of behaviors that self-leaders exemplify that enable them to be successful in the organization, in their personal lives, contributing towards whatever it is that an organization that we are trying to do. So if you think about, the major changes just over the last few weeks and few months, we've got people in several countries here, the changes going on, it's happening globally at different speeds. So, I believe that never before have we needed the proactive behaviors of self-leaders more than we do today. And you might be asking yourself, well, okay, what is self-leadership? I mean, leadership is one of those words that, means something different to everyone, means nothing. It means all sorts of things. I mean, in my mind, self-leadership is really having the mindset, the skill set, the tool set, to ask for what you need to be successful. So, it means that you take initiative, you accept the responsibility for your own success in the workplace and in your personal life. And I know many of you might be saying, well, Roberto, I'm not a leader. I don't have the title. I don't have a team. And I'm going to say, well, okay, hold that thought, keep it. I don't want to wash it off, but we'll come to that in just a second as we speak a little bit further on. A third finding from the research is, and this one is helpful to me because, it shows that these proactive self-leadership skills can be taught. So self-leadership is a skill. Some people seem to be born with, be born as self-leaders because they're more extrovert or more comfortable in asking for what they need, or maybe it's just because they're more comfortable in complaining. The fact is that whether you are an introvert or an extrovert, direct, indirect, self-leadership skills can be taught. And they can be learned by anyone. And I think that's important. And to me, it's a hopeful, it's a powerful thing. So let's go on to the second poll. Alessandro, if you can open up and share the second poll with us. So as we get ready to do the second poll, this time, as I say, you can only vote for one of the items. And which of these three statements do you find most relevant to you right now? Is it that self-leadership is an essential ingredient in organizational initiatives and success, or is it the second one that research has identified, what it means to be a proactive leader, or is it that, the proactive self-leadership skills can be taught? So if you go ahead and select one of those and hit submit, so we can have a look, and I'll share that in just a moment. So, could be 1, 2, or 3. You can only do one, but go ahead and have a look at those. And we'll give everyone a last couple of seconds. While we give everyone a couple of seconds, I'm just going to have a quick sip of some water, very warm in Zurich. Oh, Alessandro, thank you. I don't know if you want to end the poll and share those results, because that's certainly interesting, And I was wondering if we were going to see this, because this is very similar to what we saw with the last group at the British Swiss Chamber, and yeah, it's really more that, the need to, people have the need to be teaching self-leadership, and that's exciting to me that it's, we can see that it is it's incredibly powerful, and it's the essentials. It's the self-leadership that's going to drive it. So, that's interesting. And Alessandro, you can stop sharing that. Thank you. And that's brilliant. And the fact is that the research says that organizations would be better off if they took some of their training and efforts and applied it more towards self-leadership instead of always focusing on management or leadership training. And to me, that's important. So hopefully, this is some interesting stuff. That self-leadership, it's coming into its time of its own, and people are starting to understand the fact that you need to lead yourself before you can really lead anybody else. So let's moving on. The model we teach at the self-leadership program is one really about having the mindset, the skill set, and the tool set. We know that from research, and research supports it, that without having the mindset, we will never be able to get the skill set or the tool set. So it's really important to focus on these three aspects of mindset, let's dive in and focus. That's what we're going to focus on today. So let's dive into the first one, which is really challenging assumed constraints. And it's also one of my favorite ones because I've got so many assumed constraints over the years. But as an assumed constraint is a belief that holds you back. It may be a belief based on past experience or something that maybe someone has told you. It may or may not be true, but you believe them, so you have an associated belief. And, some of us might believe that, my manager who earns more than I do, is more experienced, well, he should know more than I do because he gets paid more than I do. So that could be, as an example. So, what I really want to do is challenge some of your beliefs today. And you can also quickly raise your virtual hands. And I think that one is found by opening up the participants. You can find virtual hands. So if you agree that, maybe your manager earns more than you do, that's a belief, go ahead, raise your hand, because it's about challenging the assumed constraints we have. And we should always be looking at, what do we give? How should we know? What do we do with this? So one of the things I'm going to try and challenge you today is challenge your assumed constraints. Not just because, some of us might believe that, my manager makes more money than I do, so he should know everything that I need. But let's challenge some of these assumed constraints. There are many assumed constraints. Firstly, when we came to Europe and Switzerland in specific, one of my assumed constraints based on experience was that Swiss people are very reserved and difficult to get to know. Until we moved into the place we currently live, met our neighbors, and that assumed constraint was totally thrown out of the window because it's in reality, what I've seen, it's not true. So we're going to challenge some of the assumed constraints today. And, and when you look at assumed constraints, I want you to think about, an assumed constraint, right now. What assumed constraint that you can think of right now that is holding you back? It's holding you back from getting beyond where you are, being more successful, turning goals into reality, driving results forward. What assumed constraint do you have that might need to be challenged today? So think of one of those. And, I'm actually going to give you an example because what we teach in our self-leadership workshop, and I want to give you a format to use and a template for this, and I'm hoping you're going to try it because actually it's a lot of fun. And, I'm not going to stand here and say, oh, believe me, trust me, this is great, that's going to work. I'd rather say, there are no guarantees, but rather than, trust me, I'm going to say, test me. Test, what I'm going to teach you, try it out, have some fun, and see how it goes. And I'm sure that you're going to enjoy working with it, in a home environment as well in the real world, because, you can look at some of the potentials or real assumed constraints and let's challenge them. So the first one, and I'm just going to jump back, is really to say, well, okay, assumed constraint might be that I am not good at working from home. That could be an assumed constraint, an example. Now, the important part is to flip that over and basically you say the opposite, and then you then tie it into a value or a work purpose or your purpose that you might have for your life. So you can turn it in and say, well, you know, I work effectively from home because, and then you add in your value or your workplace purpose. And in this case, you know, the example is, I genuinely care about my clients, finding creative ways to be proactive, providing them with the best service possible. So once you've flipped the assumed constraint, you now have a really powerful statement about your work. And then we've got to take it one step further, because, you know, the real power comes in is when you start to take action. So this is when we take an action step related to the assumed constraint. And, you know, this could be that, you know, in this case, each day I will send 3 of my clients a message, whether on SMS or email or WhatsApp, you know, checking in on their health, their well-being, and share some ideas of how I might be of better service to them. So, you know, here's something that you have taken that is really negative, like I am not good at working from home, and you've been able to flip it over into an effective statement that you can work from home, as well as have come up with an action step that will help you fulfill that purpose. So that's one of the tools we tend to teach, and something quite interesting, because quite often, you know, when you think of assumed constraints, they come from beliefs. Beliefs are interesting things because we've got general beliefs about the world, like in my case, general beliefs about what Swiss people were like, but then we've also got more personal ones, and that's really based on your upbringing, your experiences, and so many things. And quite often we don't really know what is a real belief or what is an assumed belief, because we just assume that everything we believe happens to be real. So that's part of what we tend to teach, you know. And activating the points of power, this is really at the core of self-leadership model, you know, the mindset part of it. Because, you know, as self-leadership is having the right mindset, it's activating your points of power. And I'd like to explain a little bit more about points of power, you know, and then we'll open up to a couple of chats, because I really want to hear from you today, you know. But I'll need to explain a little bit about the points of power, and I'm hoping that when you go through the points of power, that this will help break through some of the assumed constraints that you might have about your own power. And again, there are no guarantees, you know, so I'm not going to say trust me, but I'm going to say test me. Then we'll know and have fun doing this. You know, in fact, you know, when I say the word power, you know, what comes to mind? You know, when I say power, think about it. What was the first thought that came to mind? I mean, quite often it can be associated to a negative connotation. Can't even speak today. A negative connotation. But what if we were to think about power, the power that comes from water? You know, Switzerland, many waterfalls, we use them to generate electricity. So what about if you think about that beautiful sunny day, the power of the sun? The sun can either be negative, stand out there too long. Yes, I'm going to go red and burn myself unless I put some sunscreen on. Or, you know, that's a negative one. Or it can be a positive one if we take solar, turn it into electricity. Now it becomes a positive power. So, you know, when, you know, and when I see it, I mean, on a day like today, it's a sunny day, it's bright, certainly brightens my day, it makes me feel lighter and more optimistic when it's sunshiny out there. I feel like everything's possible. So, you know, power in nature is not negative, it's not positive, it's really neutral, but it becomes positive or negative in how we use it. So start to think about power in a different way. You know, think of it in terms of the sole purpose, the sole advantage of power is to do more good. Think about it, to do more good. So, you know, what I want you to think about are 5 different ways you might be powerful. Now, you know, and then we're going to open it up to a chat. So, you know, when you think about it, there are 5 different points of power. There's no right, there's no wrong, there's no better, there's no worse ones. You know, which one do you have activated right now? And which of these points of power that you may be able, you know, that you may have active, you know, may be able to activate by using some of these. So, you know, because you've got one, you can certainly activate more of it. So you might have position power. When actually you have a title or an authority. So, you might be the managing director. Well, all of a sudden I have a title, I have authority over people, I have authority over budgets, over hiring and firing people, but not many of us have position power. But a lot of us have what I call task power. So task power is when you have power over a particular task or job that you do, and I was out at our local bike shop. Those of you who know me, I love to ride bikes. I was out at the local bike shop, went in to get something, needed to ask a couple of technical questions. The young man helping me out there happened to be in his apprenticeship. I think he was in his first year. So, we got a chatting and, we were talking about points of power. And he said to me, well, I don't have any power in the job I'm doing. I work for a small bicycle shop, first year apprentice. I don't have any. I don't have anyone that lead. I've got no power. What power do I have? And I said to him, well, that's interesting. I said, because let's try reframe it. I mean, you've got task power because you are speaking to me. So you've got knowledge over your particular job, over, the topic we're talking about. And you also have several other points of power because you've also got personal power, because as we are as we are talking to each other and we are using our skills, well, personal power is what you're probably going to, convince me, and not in a bad way, but convince me because I'm asking you questions and you're going to direct me into the product I need the most. And he kind of thought of it and went like, never thought of it that way. So in his case, he had both task power and personal power. So, personal power is really about the interpersonal skills, leadership skills. Maybe you're an informal leader. Maybe you're the kind of person who's just such a great listener that people constantly keep coming up to and sharing, what they're experiencing. Or maybe you just have that charisma. You're a bubbly type person that when you walk into a room, everyone just gravitates towards you. You don't need to be the best. You don't need to be the smartest, the most productive, but you're great at speaking. You can articulate yourself well, so you get promoted. So personal power can be that, you actually really beautiful. I mean, in some countries and some cultures around the world, beauty is a power. And, I think even in the US, it's shown that, tall people, so not like myself, anyone who's generally over 6 foot tall, and that's not me. For those of you who have met me, over 6 foot tall in the US, you tend to move up the corporate ladder faster. So, me being short, I've decided that, actually, I'm going to use that as a point of my personal power because, guess what? When you're short, not many people expect much of you. So when you do something, people go, wow, and you're short, which is great because that works well for me. So you keep surprising people. So, people, you can, often people define points of power. You can define it the way you want to see it, and it's as long as you see it in a way that helps you achieve your goals and helps you have success, and maybe it's relationship power. I mean, I know we spoke about the knowledge power, but relationship power, it's, depending on who you might be connected to or who you might know, or maybe you've had a mentor or a past boss or know someone, and because they have a status or they have a situation or know someone, you can utilize them. So for example, I mean, one of my very first bosses in corporate, Mark Patilla, who's now the senior VP at Koger in the US. So I know he had a lot of power, and I used him as a relationship power because in the organization, just being associated to him, people knew that you were on a move, they had certain expectations of you, and they were prepared to help you. So quite often, just being connected or having relationship power to someone certainly helps you become powerful yourself. Now, I'm going to open it, let's do a chat because I'd love to see what powers you have. Which of these points of power do you think you have active right now? Share that in the chat. And yeah, you can vote for more than one of those. So if you think you have position power or task power, personal power, relationship or knowledge power, go ahead, type it into the chat. I'd love to hear, and see what you've got. So, which of these points of power do you think you have most active right now? And yeah, go ahead, hit the chat. And Gino says, in control. In control. I like that, Gino. Whoa, I've jumped around a bit there. Yeah, so no, I'd love to hear from Dean, Aurelia. I'd love to hear from a few more of you. Stefan, if you're still on the line, we would love to hear from you guys, just to hear what points of personal power do you have active right now. We're going to give everyone a couple of seconds just to type into the chat box and hit enter while I have a quick sip of water. Okay. Well, to me, it's at this moment in time, in coming out of the time of social distancing, to me, the power that I want to certainly need to have active is what I would say relationship power, because, when you think of it, I hope that, you can see that relationship power because of the situation and the social distancing we're going through. So that's one that I am working on. Aurelia, thank you. I have power for all of them, and it's all up to me. Most of all, knowledge power. Very nice. I like it, Aurelia. So, it's great. And, when you really think about all of these, and like Aurelia says, all of these personal powers, they're all powers that you can activate. And it's really up to you. As Aurelia says, it's all up to me. So connect with people, utilize your personal points of power that you may have. I did jump one slide too far in. So, I quickly want to do another one and just, again, in the chat box, just say, which of these personal points of powers would you like to activate? So, maybe you don't have it as strong as you might want it, but what else could you activate into the future? And I'm just going to have a quick look at Gino's one. In the case I have a bit of all of these points of power, enough to make and take them. I want to be in today's times. I love it. I'm glad that we're all being powerful on the call today. No, that is awesome and great to hear. So I hope that this makes sense. Dean says knowledge and relationship power would be my top two. Excellent, Dean. I love it. Aurelia says position power. Yeah, they certainly all points of power that we want to have active and utilize more. And I think quite often, the takeaway there is we are more powerful than what we think we are, because we don't necessarily see what we already have and what we want to be doing. When I look at some of them, in terms of relationship power, knowledge, even position power, I once read a quote, and I can't remember, it was a US Navy admiral, I think. And, he was along the lines of saying that, the perfect position that you really want to be in is to have position power, so the authority over people, but never have to use it. And that kind of just made me think about, wow, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because we've got so many other points of power that either we are using or can activate more. So, quite often, I'm hoping that just by realizing that you are powerful and, just your own assumed constraints might be blocking you back. So, during this time, reach out, work with your powers that you have fun that you have. Quite often, when you get together with some people, you can ask them, what is your superpower? And might get some strange answers in terms of superpower, especially if you look at, Facebook and so forth. Interesting people come out with interesting t-shirts, but, from a power of, from the points of power, what is your superpower? And how do you utilize and work with those more? The third part of the model, of the self-leadership model, is really, it's the part, in terms of the mindset again, it's about being proactive, and I think, Gino has mentioned it, Aurelia has mentioned it, it's up to me. How do I make this happen? So, being proactive, as I said, is actually teachable. These are proactive skills that absolutely anybody can learn. I mean, I just think in my own personal life, I know Dean and I have spent many hours talking about cycling and racing around Europe on our bikes, but it's one of those. I mean, quite often being proactive, especially if I haven't been on the bike for a while and I'm not riding or feeling as physically fit and strong as I used to, it becomes more challenging. So I really had to be more proactive in getting on the bike. Once you're on the bike, it's okay, but just putting on the clothes and getting on and getting out there can be a challenge. But you've got to become proactive. You know, it's not something that happens naturally. You know, and that's why, you know, if you look at it, a lot of people say, well, I need to lose weight, or I need to eat healthier, or sleep more. But yet people struggle to do that. So being proactive is certainly a skill that absolutely anybody can learn. You know, and I'd like you to think for a moment and think about the best work experience that you've ever had. And at the same time, think also about the worst work experience that you've ever had. And, you know, if you like most of us, and you think of the best times, those are probably the times when you were being successful. But in order to be successful, you were getting what you needed to be successful. You were getting those things, you know, the support, the help, the tools, the resources to get things done. And the same, you know, if you think about the worst of times really is when you needed things and you probably weren't getting them. And because you weren't getting them, well, your motivation probably dropped, got frustrated. Yeah, you weren't as proactive, and naturally you weren't seeing the results. So, you know, what we know from the research is that if we're going to be successful, we need to get both direction and support. You know, and we need that when we need it, because, you know, it's not something that you need only once off. It's not like, you know, me jumping on the bike and going, well, I'm going for a bike ride now, and guess what? I'm going to be fit for the rest of my life. No, you need to get direction and support on an ongoing basis. You know, when you need it, you need to get what you need. So, you know, and that's what we really need in order to create the best of times that we have. So, you know, being proactive is really about getting the direction and support that you need. And that is what is really, really important to make great times. Now, earlier I said, some of you might be thinking, well, I'm not a leader. And, you know, and that's, you know, and I wanted to come back to this slide because, you know, what is important is that a leader is anyone that can give you direction and support that you need. Or flip that over, I mean, you can be the leader to anyone who needs direction and support. So either you are a leader to everyone around you, or at the same time, because you can be in both places simultaneously, you need someone to lead you because you need direction and support. Very seldom do we fit in just one of those. I believe those two are very much congruent, lined up, and work together. Now, so when you go out and you are proactive and you proactively go out and get the support, get the direction that you need, then it's to everyone's best interest, especially yours. So this is what the research shows, you know, and I actually just want to share a bit about the research, because research actually shows that we are less stressful and we have more energy when we go out and be proactive. You know, so my challenge for you today, and I know it's already the middle of the week, but you've got a couple of days this week. So I want you to be proactive. I want you to either get on a phone call, get on an email, be proactive, and ask someone for some feedback. And what I mean by some feedback, you know, go and ask them, you know, because we all know that feedback is the breakfast of champions. So, you know, I want you to reach out to someone and ask them and say to them, you know, with so much of us working in virtual worlds, you know, as an example, I was on a Zoom call last week, you know, and I was trying to get this point across. Could you give me some feedback on how successful you thought I was doing that? Or, you know, you're putting a proposal for a client or a customer together, and, you know, you can ask someone, reach out to someone and say, you know, here's the proposal I'm about to send out. Could you recommend what I could do differently for my proposal next time? Or, you know, you really need to look at look at things differently. Look at things of how other people might be able to do it. Look at things of, how they see it, so that, next time we can change it and we can be better at it. So, be proactive and simply ask for feedback. One of the things that research shows is that, and this is one really surprised me, because 61% of leaders today who have been trained, so trained leaders, 61% of them don't like giving feedback, which I thought, that's interesting. I mean, yeah, they've been trained, but yet still don't like. I mean, more than half don't like to give feedback. And further, these respondents went on to say, and the research showed that 64% of the time, they felt their feedback was more negative than positive. Well, what I mean by that is, it's not that it had bad results, but it's just had a negative effect. The results of the feedback, should really be to teach more, teach individuals, help promote, and quite often we give feedback and it has a negative effect. At least that's certainly what the research shows. So, my challenge to you is to really, go out on a regular basis, ask for feedback. And I'm not saying just from your managers, but also ask from your team members, from your colleagues, and again, say to them, I need your feedback in order to be better. What did I do today or this week that I should keep doing? And what do you think that I could do differently that might have a better influence, more impact, would be benefit to you? So, I'm challenging you, go out, be proactive, and ask for feedback in the next few days. I'd love to hear, some of the things that happen and what comes back out of that, And, importantly, one of the things I asked up front is just remember, managers are not mind readers. If you've got kids, well, you will know this well. Children want things, but you're not always a mind reader. Quite often, you don't know what they need when they need it. So, my encouragement is to, reach out to your managers. We need to be proactive. We need to ask for what we need, Feedback is asking for what we need in order to create the best of times. Then I say to you, go out and do it. And it's also not fair on the managers, on us as parents. Now, because I've got 2 boys and we went through a lot of this fun. So it's not fair on us parents, on us managers. We can't read minds. Not even the people that are closest to us, our husbands, our wives, boyfriend, girlfriends, our better halves, can read our minds. So, it's unfair to expect our managers, our leaders, to be able to to read our minds. And just before we go to the Q&A, I want to quickly do a quick recap. I think what we've looked at is when organizations don't execute well, it's generally because their people aren't taking the initiative. People are not being as effective as they could be. And organizations then usually land up not delivering results. Goals don't turn into reality. Performance, projects, goals get stalled. And that's generally because people don't know how to ask for what they need when they need it. And research also indicates that in this study, half of the contributors, the individual contributors of the survey, felt that their jobs were stagnant. And, probably even worse than that is 1 out of 3 just did their jobs and nothing more. And I'm sure we all know some of those people, or may even have been in that situation where you were not enjoying what you were doing, you weren't engaged, you just showed up, did what you had to do, and nothing more. Not in a nice place to be. So we can change that, And on the flip side of the coin is, imagine how resilient your organization could be if it was filled with people who had the skills, the self-confidence to get what they needed, without unnecessary guidance and without wasting time. I believe that everybody deserves to be the best, to have the best of times. They deserve to learn how to be the best versions of themselves, to contribute, to make a difference, to turn goals into reality. People are the future of your business, and the more we invest in them now in terms of time, support, giving them feedback, the greater the probability of setting them up as well as our organization for success. And just some of the benefits of having self-leaders within the workplace, and the benefit of being a self-leader and taking, ownership and the acceptance and responsibility and the drive, is certainly that self-leaders take control of their own development. They ask for direction, they ask for the support they need, so they're able to move up the learning curve to mastering anything quicker than most other people. Also empowered self-leaders are more engaged, committed, consistently working hard, increasing performance across levels of the organization. Some of the other things we see is that self-leaders are not held accountable. They tend to hold themselves accountable. Let me say that again. Self-leaders are not held accountable. They hold themselves accountable for achieving their goals, achieving their success, for executing on the organization's initiatives. And empowered self-leaders also know how to go out and overcome challenges and constraints that that they may find that are limited. So they have the ability to solve problems, address challenges, and develop innovative solutions. So, if it's okay, I'd love to share, just very briefly, quickly, a little bit about our self-leadership program, which is really a pathway to help create a workforce of self-leaders to power an organization. So, in the self-leadership, we teach individuals at all levels of the organization how to become empowered self-leaders who accept responsibility, take initiatives for their own success. Self-leadership is a program that helps organizations give their people the mindset, the skill set for getting what they need to succeed. The program's based on research, using different self-leadership models, when it's based upon one of the leadership models taught mostly and mainly around the world. So it integrates some of the latest research on proactive skills from individuals to be the most effective. Self-leadership is also a program, and it's for someone who's really committed to making a difference, for someone who's committed to taking action, someone who's ready to take emotional risks. That's who it's for. If you want to turn goals into reality, that's who it's for. On the other hand, if you don't want to change, if you like to talk about, being more proactive, more successful, but you just want to carry on talking about it and thinking about it, then it's probably not for you. But I want, I write this down because in August I am doing an open group session, and that's really when life changes, because life changes is where you build the self-confidence and you get to activate your points of power. It's a virtual session. It's designed to be 3 virtual 2-hour sessions. Yes, participants receive a variety of different tools, from workbooks to participant kits to then carrying on and taking it further by mastering it through the mobile app. And it's available in several different languages and materials. Just to give you a little bit more detail. So this is kind of what the self-leadership journey looks like, because we know that one of the biggest challenges is moving from learning to doing. And yes, we can provide people with learning and development opportunities, but generally research shows that only 10% of what people learn in class, they actually remember and do. And that's no different. You've probably all been to some impact trainings where you've learned you've done some great stuff. You went back to the office, went back into your personal life, even applied some of it, started to see some results, but then day 3, 4, a week later, you kind of slowed down and weren't doing it anymore. So, the self-leadership moves from it being an event, a one-time workshop, to a complete learning journey. And this enables people to practice the new skills, master them over time. And research indicates that it takes up to 21 days to build a new habit. So the self-leadership program uses our launch, learn, practice, and master process. These learning phases were specifically designed to build long-term behavior changes. So you start off with the launch. It's introduction to the workshop concepts. You're prepared to bring some real life examples into the workshop. Yes, you've got some homework to do in terms of the self-leadership questionnaire. Then into the workshop, into the learn. We then learn the self-leadership mindset and the skill sets. And then we also practice how to apply these in interactive assignments with the other participants. After the workshop, the learning is not over. We carry on with additional resources that really help you shift into implementing those new skills, developing a new habit. So, if this sounds, something that you might be interested for yourself or your team, after the Q&A, stay online. We'll have a quick chat. Let's set up our calendars for a short 10-minute conversation later this week or early next week, and then we can have a look at that. But I really want to open it up to the Q&A. So, up until now, let's, Alessandro, can you unmute everybody as we open it up to the Q&A? So up until now, I'd like to say thank you for participating, and let's open up to the Q&A. Let's go ahead and unmute everybody's mic. Oh, somehow I landed up on mute, so I do apologize. I've unmuted myself again. So opening up to the Q&A, if you have any questions, drop them into the chat box. I'd love to read them and to answer them as best as I can. While you think about the questions, you want to type either into the chat box or you're unmuted. And I'd like to say thank you to everyone. Q&A is now open, so by all means, let's have a listen to any of the questions you might have. While I let you think, I'm going to have a quick sip. Alessandro, anything from your side that you've seen in the chat box or anything that... let's have a look. Aurelio says, Alessandro, can you see?
No problem.
Yes, Aurelia, we can certainly connect and have a chat about that. Alessandro, anything from your side in terms of questions that you might have seen that I might have missed in the chat box?
Well, I got one question. Engagement in a normal versus crisis situation.
The engagement, normal versus crisis circumstances, situations. Yeah, I mean, probably the first one is choice. Choice has a lot to do with that. It's much harder in this environment, especially if you're still in lockdown. And, it's a crisis situation. It's not what is normal. So it's harder because choice has a lot to it. You're not choosing to be stuck at home working virtually. You would rather choose to be in the office. So what I have noticed is people need to connect. Yes, the work needs to get done, but people need to connect first, or the work won't get done, or probably in the least it won't get done in a way that we expect it to or need it to get done. Another thing I see is companies over communicating. They're investing in making personal time available to people. So I know in Switzerland, because where the schools have gone back and everything's back. I mean, my wife works at one of the international schools, and the first day they went back and connected with all the kids, it had nothing to do with actually trying to teach the kids. It was really all about just letting the kids connect, getting them to build rapport again, because they had been missing that. So, people need to connect. They need to see each other again. So it was nothing about schoolwork or anything like that. So, connect, over communicate. When people are not doing this by choice, I think you can never over communicate. Some organizations out there, I know that, they were sending, for example, their employees 2 emails a day from their leadership team. It might sound extreme, but it was 2. Then every manager would do a skip meeting, which meant, he would skip his own direct reports and go down to the next level to try and connect with them on a regular basis, understand their concerns, their thoughts, their questions that they had. Because again, people are already worried about, what does this mean to me? So, I think in crisis situation, over communicate. When it goes back to a normal situation, then I think the one-to-one is absolutely fine. One-to-one conversations will be enough. But for the crisis situation, yeah, absolutely. Be purposeful, connect with everyone, and have a look at that one in terms of the communication side and connecting. Any questions from anyone else there? Dean, Aurelia?
I thought the presentation was excellent, Robbie. Thank you. I've got one question.
Yes, sir.
Is there a difference, or what are the differences between the situational leadership model and the self-leadership materials?
Oh, that's an awesome question, Dean. No, thank you for asking that one. They both based on exactly the same model. The self-leadership is pretty much the situational leadership taken from the individual contributor's perspective. So anyone who is working for a situational leadership person would go through self-leadership, because that's something, at least you've got the same language to talk through. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks.
Perfect. No, thank you. I mean, we got to have a chat about self-leadership offline. I'm interested to hear your thoughts about that.
Sure, no problem.
Any other questions? Dean, Aurelia, anything I can answer? We do have a couple of more minutes left.
I've got one more question.
Oh, yeah, go, Alain.
What are some of the basics for working in a virtual environment?
The basics of working in a virtual environment. Probably the first place to start is looking at and going, well, the normal environment, the face-to-face environment, a lot of the things that I think we used to get away with, we maybe can't or shouldn't be getting away with in the virtual environment. So a lot of the things we learned and knew how to do in a face-to-face environment are not necessarily transferable to a virtual environment. So certainly in a virtual environment, the one-to-one meetings, those regular check-in and checkups that we used to do around the coffee machine or in the hallway, well, those don't take place anymore. So, you've got to put those sort of conversations in place to make them happen. Otherwise, they don't just happen, on their own. So a lot of the things that we used to get away with, we can't get away with. So, the emphasis really has to be on engaging with the people, understanding, the needs, and, being able to plan and share information. And we should always have meetings, we should always have the key criterion, discussing what is the right forum, what is the content, what is the information that's needed. One of the things I tend to see is we might be using the wrong tool to communicate, whether it's email or Teams or a WhatsApp instant message, for the wrong sort of thing. Quite often a lot of those can be used, there are better tools for it, for certain things. So I certainly think, the basics is we need to move away and learn some new concepts, new ideas, because what applies in the face-to-face world does not necessarily transfer into the virtual environment. Hopefully that answers your question, Alessandro.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, perfect. Now, in that case, I can only say thank you to everyone. That really concludes our session. And I just want to leave everyone with one final last thought on a sunny, beautiful day. Hopefully it's the same for everyone wherever you are, that, in a world crying out for effective leadership, you need to begin with the most obvious source, which is yourself. The self-leadership journey may be the most important journey you take. So in that case, I say thank you to everyone. If you do want more information, then stick around. I'll be here for the next 5-10 minutes, as long as it takes. But thank you so much. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure connecting with everyone. Grazie, Aurelia. Yeah, and hopefully, you'll join us soon. Oh, before I forget, next week, Wednesday, I've got a brand new webinar. If anyone's interested, I'm happy to share some information on that one. Totally different topic to today's one. So in that case, thank you to everyone, and I wish you a fantastic rest of the day. Thanks, Dean. Stay safe in the UK.